Welcome, and thank you for being here. Whether this is your first time listening or you're returning for another quiet moment, you're invited to settle in and listen at your own pace. In this episode, we'll reflect on an early Buddhist discourse that explores the connection between love, attachment, and sorrow, how deeply caring for others can bring both joy and vulnerability. This teaching speaks directly to everyday life, to family bonds, relationships, loss, and the quiet fears we carry about change. Rather than offering easy answers, the Sutta invites us to look honestly at the heart and to see how wisdom can soften even the most difficult experiences. As you listen, there's nothing to achieve, just an openness to hear and reflect. In this discourse, the Buddha is staying near the city of Savath in Jeta's Grove, a monastery offered by the wealthy supporter Anathapindika. People come and go here, monks, lay followers, seekers, bringing with them the ordinary troubles of human life. On this occasion, the teaching begins not with philosophy, but with raw grief. A householder has lost his only child, a young son who was deeply loved. Since the boy's death, the man's life has collapsed inward. He no longer wants to work. He no longer wants to eat. Again and again, he goes to the cemetery, crying out into the emptiness, calling for his child as if the dead could answer back. His mind is no longer steady. It circles endlessly around what has been lost. Eventually, he comes to the Buddha. After bowing respectfully, he sits down. The Buddha looks at him carefully and speaks gently but directly. He tells the man that his mental faculties are disturbed, that his mind is not settled. The householder is taken aback. How could it be otherwise, he asks. His beloved child has died. His grief feels natural, unavoidable, even justified. The Buddha does not argue with the depth of the man's pain. Instead, he points to its source. He says that sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair arise from what is dear. They spring from attachment, from love that clings and cannot bear change. The householder cannot accept this. To him it sounds wrong, even heartless. Surely happiness and joy come from those we love, not sorrow. Hurt and disappointed, he rejects the Buddha's words and leaves. Not far away, a group of gamblers is throwing dice. The grieving father repeats the conversation to them, explaining what the Buddha said. The gamblers side with him immediately. Of course, happiness comes from those who are dear, they say. The man feels confirmed. He walks away thinking he has found the wiser view. But the teaching does not end there. Word of this exchange reaches the palace of King Pasenadi of Kosala. The king mentions it to his queen, Malika, repeating the Buddha's statement that suffering arises from what is dear. Malika does not hesitate. She says plainly, if the Buddha said it, then it must be true. The king bristles at this. He accuses her of blindly agreeing with the Buddha, of endorsing anything he says without question. In a flash of irritation, he orders her out of his sight. Malika does not argue. Instead, she acts carefully and intelligently. She sends a trusted Brahmin, Nalijanga, to the Buddha. She asks him to inquire politely about the Buddha's health, and then to confirm exactly what was said. Whatever the Buddha replies, she says, should be remembered clearly, because awakened ones do not speak falsely. Nalijanga goes to Jeta's Grove and poses the question. The Buddha confirms it without hesitation. Yes, suffering arises from what is dear. And then he explains why, using examples drawn from ordinary life in Savath. He speaks of women who lost their mothers, fathers, siblings, children, or husbands, and who, overwhelmed by grief, lost their sanity. They wandered the streets crying out for the dead, unable to accept the reality of loss. He speaks also of men who did the same after losing those they loved. In each case, the pattern is the same: deep attachment, followed by unbearable suffering when change occurs. The Buddha then recounts an even darker story. A woman is separated from her husband by her relatives, who want to force her into another marriage. Unable to bear separation, the husband kills both her and himself, believing that death is preferable to living apart. Again, the Buddha points to the same root, suffering born from what is dear. These examples are not meant to shock for their own sake. They show, again and again, how attachment, pima in Pali, meaning affectionate clinging, contains within it the seed of sorrow. Love itself is not condemned, but unexamined attachment is revealed as fragile and dangerous when faced with impermanence. Nalijangha returns and reports everything faithfully to Queen Malika. Then Malika goes to the king. She does not argue in abstract terms. Instead, she asks questions the king cannot avoid. She asks whether his daughter is dear to him. He says yes. She asks whether he would suffer if something happened to her. He answers honestly that such a loss would shatter him. She asks the same about his other loved ones, his queen, his son, even his people, whose well-being supports his royal life. Each time, the king admits the truth. If anything were to happen to them, sorrow and despair would inevitably arise. Only then does Malika connect the dots. This, she says, is exactly what the Buddha meant. Suffering is not an accident layered on top of love. It is bound up with it whenever love is mixed with clinging and the demand that things not change. At last, the king sees it. He is struck by the depth of the Buddha's insight, how clearly he understands the human heart. Moved and humbled, King Pasenadi performs a gesture of reverence toward the Buddha, honoring him as one who sees deeply and speaks truthfully. The heart of this sutta is not a rejection of love, but a sober recognition of its vulnerability. The Buddha is pointing to a truth that is uncomfortable but deeply relevant. Whatever we hold as mine, whatever we cannot imagine losing, becomes a source of fear and suffering because it is subject to change. In daily life, this teaching invites reflection rather than suppression. It asks us to notice how tightly we cling to people, roles, identities, even expectations, and how much suffering is hidden in that grip. The practice is not to become cold or detached, but to love with wisdom, to care deeply, while remembering that all conditioned things are impermanent. When this understanding is gently cultivated, love becomes more spacious. It hurts less when change comes, not because we care less, but because we no longer demand that life obey our wishes. In this way, the Buddha's teaching points toward a freedom that does not deny love, but releases it from the burden of clinging. As we come to the end of this reflection, the heart of the teaching remains simple and challenging. Whatever we hold most dearly is also where we are most exposed to suffering, not because love is wrong, but because clinging asks life to stay still when it cannot. The Buddha's words invite us to care deeply, while also seeing clearly, to love without demanding permanence. You might carry this into your day by gently noticing where attachment shows up. When worry or fear arises around someone you love, see if you can meet it with awareness rather than resistance. In quiet moments, you could reflect on how impermanence shapes your relationships, not to diminish them, but to appreciate them more fully. If these reflections feel meaningful, you're welcome to return for more contemplative explorations of the early Buddhist texts here on Still Mind Suttas. However you continue, may your practice support both compassion and clarity, moment by moment.